Indian Prime Minister Modi was given the grandest welcome by Sri Lanka, which included military honors in what has been possibly one of his most impactful foreign policy victories against Chinese inroads in the Indian Ocean region. On one hand, sealing the first ever India-Sri Lanka Defence Pact, and on the other, helping Colombo recover from the Chinese debt trap and Beijing's influence. The visit witnessed not only a historic defense alliance but also several other key agreements which we will elaborate. The Indian Prime Minister has also become the first foreign leader to be given Sri Lanka's highest civilian honor, the Mitra Vibhushan, something not even bestowed upon Xi Jinping thus far. The historic Independence Square in the Sri Lankan capital witnessed President Dissanayake bestow the honor, acknowledging India as Sri Lanka's time-tested and closest friend.
यह सम्मान केवल मेरा सम्मान नहीं बल्कि यह 140 करोड़ भारतीयों का सम्मान।
Now this will surely rattle Xi Jinping's CCP in Beijing. After all, President Dissanayake has often been considered as pro-China and a leftist and Marxist. But here he is giving Sri Lanka's highest honor to the Indian Prime Minister. And in fact, here is CCP mouthpiece, the Global Times, playing down how India is gaining an upper hand in Sri Lanka once again. Earlier, President Dissanayake had again chosen India for his first foreign visit ahead of China, which is highly symbolic. So how has India achieved this strategic advantage in Sri Lanka, a country that was once firmly in the Chinese debt trap? Prime Minister Modi and President Dissanayake chaired high-level delegation talks following which the historic Defence Cooperation Pact was signed at a time when China is actively trying to increase its footprint in the region from Sri Lanka to Maldives to Myanmar and Bangladesh now. In a press conference, Prime Minister Modi asserted, quote, "We believe that we have shared security interests. The security of both the countries is interconnected and codependent. I am grateful to President Dissanayake for his sensitivity towards India's interests," unquote. Lauding India's global stature, the Sri Lankan president replied, quote, "We sincerely applaud the way India has positioned itself not only as a regional power but also as a global leader," unquote. In the past, the visit of Chinese surveillance vessels and Navy warships in Sri Lanka has caused concern in New Delhi. However, the Sri Lankan president had a veiled message for China that Sri Lankan territory will not be used to undermine India's security or regional stability. So what is this historic Defence Cooperation Pact and the trilateral energy deal Prime Minister Modi and President Dissanayake have sanctioned? Now, this historic defense alliance comes nearly 40 years after Indian peacekeeping forces' role in the island nation, presenting a new, broader roadmap for stronger bilateral ties. The pact has three clear outlines. Firstly, to formalize joint military exercises to boost interoperability. Secondly, joint training programs. And lastly, regular high-level exchanges. An MOU or Memorandum of Understanding with a framework agreement has been inked by both the sides. The two neighbors also agreed to jointly strengthen the Colombo Security Conclave and broader security cooperation in the Indian Ocean region. Now, in cooperation with the UAE, India and Sri Lanka also sealed a trilateral pact to transform Trincomalee into an energy hub. Now, this very deal will focus on supplying the island with affordable energy options at a time when the nation is emerging from economic hardships. Another key agreement included a long-proposed multi-product pipeline between India and Sri Lanka and the development of the largely unused oil tank farms in Trincomalee. The energy cooperation deal is also significant. It comes months after Sri Lanka's agreement with Chinese state oil giant Sinopec, signed during Dissanayake's recent visit to Beijing for construction of a $3.7 billion refinery at the Chinese-controlled Hambantota port. So now India and the United Arab Emirates have collaborated to pledge energy security for the island nation. Several other agreements were also signed in digital infrastructure, healthcare, trade facilitation, and regional development. Apart from reducing interest rates for loans given to the island nation, Prime Minister Modi emphasized how India has converted loans worth $100 million into grants now in just the last 6 months alone to help Sri Lanka. Prime Minister Modi also announced a support package of approximately 2.4 billion Sri Lankan rupees for social and economic development of eastern provinces of the island nation. As part of India's neighborhood first policy, New Delhi has always extended financial aid to Colombo. In response to Sri Lanka entering sovereign default in 2022, India extended aid of $4 billion in financing facilities to Sri Lanka, amounting to around 5% of Sri Lanka's pre-crisis GDP. So why has India time and again gone out of its way to support Sri Lanka? Is it just about keeping Chinese influence at an arm's length? Now, firstly, India and Sri Lanka share deep bonds of culture, religion, and a shared history between the two peoples. During his trip, Prime Minister Modi also visited the Jaya Sri Mahabodhi temple. The tree here is believed to have grown from the bow sapling that was brought to Sri Lanka by Sanghamitra, the daughter of Indian Emperor Ashoka in the 3rd century BC to promote Indian Buddhist teachings. Now, Emperor Ashoka or Ashoka the Great is considered one of the greatest Indian kings ever, whose empire covered most of the present Indian subcontinent all the way to Afghanistan and beyond, and that too in the 3rd century BC. However, in the 21st century, Sri Lanka has its own strategic interests, as does India. During President Dissanayike's visit to China in January, both the nations bolstered their strategic cooperation, including signing the Belt and Road Cooperation Plan. Sri Lanka has long been accused of falling into the Chinese debt trap by accepting unsustainable loans for infra projects, giving full power to Beijing to seize these assets in times of financial distress. According to US intelligence, China will use such debt traps to eventually establish military facilities in a few of these nations. A US intelligence report in March last year stated, quote, "The People's Liberation Army or the PLA will continue to pursue the establishment of overseas military installations and access agreements in an attempt to project power and protect China's interests abroad." It added, quote, "Beyond developing its military base in Djibouti and its military facility at Ream Naval Base in Cambodia, Beijing reportedly is considering pursuing military facilities in multiple locations, including but not limited to Myanmar, Cuba, Equatorial Guinea, Pakistan, Seychelles, Sri Lanka, Tajikistan, Tanzania, and the UAE, unquote. So will China use its clout to try and establish a military base in Sri Lanka? Can India allow such a development? It's like India trying to establish a military base in Taiwan. Will the CCP just sit back and allow it to happen? In recent years, the presence of Chinese naval ships has also become an irritant in India-Sri Lanka relations. In 2023, Chinese research vessel or surveillance ship Xi'an 6 conducted joint research work with Sri Lankan officials during its visit to Colombo. Similarly, back in August 2022, 115 was berthed at the southernmost Hambantota port. Now, this vessel has expertise in satellite and missile tracking, among other acts of surveillance. India's growing concern stems from the fact that the CCP would use these vessels not just for seabed mapping to enable submarine operations, but also collect other crucial data related to oceanic currents, positioning of Indian warships or submarines in the entire Indian Ocean region. As China, like any global power, attempts to exert its influence in this region, India is also paying increased emphasis on boosting its own ties with key neighboring countries, including Bhutan, Nepal, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Myanmar. But what do you believe? Is Sri Lanka arguably India's most strategically important neighbor? Leave a comment with your opinion, hit the like button, and subscribe to Inconnect News.